That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural, and very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states, and the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor, we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country. We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. Illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. and by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal. which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America, promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We're going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, performing America the Beautiful, please welcome the Armed Forces Chorus and Carrie Underwood.
Apologies, we seem to have lost the audio there coming from the rotunda at the Capitol building. Carrie Underwood, the country singer, is about to sing, coming at the end of quite a long second inaugural address from the new president, the 47th president, Donald Trump. He talked about the golden age of America beginning right here, right now. Will be the envy of every nation, he said. And he's going to put America first. And then he went through quite a long list of what he believed was wrong with America and what the last 4 years have yielded in terms of America going in several wrong directions. But let's go back now and hear the voices.
In majesties above the fruited plain, America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
So they managed to fix the audio there, coming from the rotunda at the Capitol building. And let's go back to events there.
I now call on Rabbi Ari Berman, Pastor Lorenzo Sewell, and Reverend Frank Mund to provide prayers of benediction.
Let us pray. Almighty God, your prophet Jeremiah walked the streets of Jerusalem and blessed its inhabitants with the Hebrew words, Baruch HaGever Asher Yiftach BaHashem. Blessed is the one who trusts in God. Thousands of years later, this great nation, which adopted these words as its motto, "In God we trust," stands at a moment of historic opportunity. Americans are searching for meaning. Our merciful Father, help us rise to meet this moment. Bless President Donald J. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance with the strength and courage to choose the right and the good. Unite us around our foundational biblical values of life and liberty, of service and sacrifice, and especially of faith and morality, which George Washington called the indispensable supports of American prosperity. Guide our schools and college campuses, which have been experiencing such unrest, to inspire the next generation to pair progress with purpose, knowledge with wisdom, and truth with virtue. Hear the cry of the hostages, both American and Israeli, whose pain our president so acutely feels. We are so thankful for the 3 young women who yesterday returned home, and pray that the next 4 years brings peace to Israel and throughout the Middle East. Almighty God, grant all Americans the opportunity to realize our shared dream of a life filled with peace and plenty, health and happiness, compassion and contribution. Stir within us the confidence to rise to this moment. For while we trust in God, God's trust is in us, the American people. America is called to greatness, to be a beacon of light and a mover of history. May our nation merit the fulfillment of Jeremiah's blessing, that like a tree planted by water, we shall not cease to bear fruit. May all of humanity experience your love and your blessing. May it be thy will, and let us say, Amen.
Let us pray for our 47th president. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that you gave our 45th and now our 47th president a millimeter miracle. We are grateful that you are the one that have called him for such a time as this, that America would begin to dream again. We pray that we would fulfill the true meaning of our creed, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We pray that you use our president, that we will live in a nation where we will not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, we are so grateful today that you will use our 47th president so we would sing with new meaning, my country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and because America is called to be a great nation, we believe that you will make this come true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous hilltops of California, but God, we're asking you not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain, Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and every molehill in Mississippi, from every state, every city, every village, and every hamlet. And when we let freedom ring, we will be able to speed up that day where all of your children, black men and white men, Protestant and Catholic, Jew and Gentile, will be able to sing in the meaning of that old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank you, God Almighty. We are free at last. If you believe where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Come on, put your hands together and give your great God great glory.
Almighty and eternal God, we gather here today in reverence, joined in our shared hopes and dreams for our beloved nation. In this sacred moment of the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, we turn our hearts to you, seeking your divine assistance and abundant blessings upon this pivotal moment in history. We come before you with profound gratitude for the many gifts you have bestowed upon our land. Thank you for the freedoms we cherish, for the strength of our communities, and for the resilience of our spirit. As our President and Vice President embrace their newly appointed roles, we humbly implore that your everlasting love and wisdom will envelop them. Grant them the clarity of mind to navigate the challenges that lie ahead and the compassion to serve all citizens with fairness and integrity. May their hearts be filled with a giving spirit and sincere understanding for those whom they represent. May they be beacons of hope in times of uncertainty and prophetic voices in defending the dignity of all created life. We pray for a spirit of collaboration to flourish in our government and across our nation, fostering an environment where dialogue and heartfelt listening will prevail over division or discord. May each decision made by our President and Vice President reflect the values of justice and peace. As we embark on this new chapter, we also seek your comfort, O God, for those who feel lost or disheartened. In this time of transition, may your light shine upon them, reaffirming their belief in a brighter tomorrow. May we all strive to lift one another, supporting our fellow citizens with kindness and empathy, recognizing that together we can overcome any adversity. Grant us the strength to endure, the courage to face our fears, and the clarity to see the light that remains, even when clouds of uncertainty may gather. Inspire our new leaders to be champions for the vulnerable and advocates for those whose voices are often silenced.
To an end,
May they pursue
the
policies that promote
religious
the well-being
element
all.
of this event. With me is Katty Kay. I want to go back to the politics, Katty. From what we heard in that second inaugural, how do you think the next 4 years are going to pan out?
Well, politics and religion mixed, because at one point Donald Trump said that he was saved by God to make America great again. That might be a line we remember. The question is, how much of what he laid out, taking back the Panama Canal, which is one of the things he said he was going to do, creating a new department of government, something that's very hard to do in the United States. How much of it that he's laid out today can he actually do? How much will his team, which is actually an interestingly diverse ideological team in the cabinet, how much will they work together to get this done? How much will they be blocked by courts? It's been a very busy few minutes. There are already 3 lawsuits have been launched against the new Trump administration just since Donald Trump was inaugurated. So we're going to see the courts stepping in. You're going to see the markets watching what he does around tariffs, and then you're going to watch his team and how much can you actually change the American government. It's an ambitious agenda that he's pointed out. We talked about the Gilded Age. He talked about the Golden Age.
And indeed, in the short term, he's announced he's going to declare a national emergency at the southern border. He's going to have mass deportations beginning as soon as possible. It sounds as if it's the American carnage speech from last time.
Without some of the darkness, we had been told that this would not be as dark as the 2017 speech, and I don't think there was that one line that we all remember about American carnage. He did talk about the things, he said America will be annihilated if it doesn't do more, that the government confronts a crisis of trust. The government can't manage a single crisis at home. I mean, there was Joe Biden sitting there, and this was not certainly laudatory of Joe Biden or in any way polite towards Joe Biden, but there are a lot of people who will look at the list of things he's done, and you look at the polls, even over the course of this weekend, Clive, there's a lot of support for what Donald Trump is talking about in terms of deportations of migrants, of deregulation, of ending the woke agenda. He was very specific about it. The biggest cheer he got during that speech, from now on there will just be 2 genders in America, a man and a woman.
Indeed, cultural change as well as political change. Well, there he is. He's, of course, now the new commander-in-chief, President Donald Trump, the 47th president and 45th president, of course. The first man in history since the early 19th century to win a second term in office out of consecutive terms. He, in his inaugural, made it clear that he is going to hit the ground running with a whole raft of executive orders. He's going to declare a national emergency on the southern border. He's going to have a mass deportation program. Obviously, those measures are going to be subject to legal challenge, but he's made it clear that he is a man of action, and it's exactly what those 77 million Americans who voted for him wanted. You can keep watching all the live coverage on the BBC News channel and iPlayer. Stay here on BBC One for the 6 o'clock news with Sophie Rayworth from the White House. But first, here's a reminder of the afternoon's events on this historic day in Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. I was saved by God to make America great again.
Welcome to our special BBC coverage of Donald Trump's second inauguration. I'm Sumi Somaskanda. You're watching live pictures from the Capitol Rotunda. Donald Trump, now president again, Donald Trump, and First Lady Melania Trump just departing through those curtains there. We have just seen him sworn in as America's 47th president. He's starting a second term in the White House in which he is promising to reshape America. You see Donald Trump and Melania Trump now exiting there through the law library doors, and they are now going to be heading to, we understand, an overflow room where many of the invited guests who could not fit in that Capitol Rotunda have been watching the inauguration ceremony. You see the outgoing President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden walking just behind there, and just behind them, now Vice President J.D. Vance and the Second Lady, Usha Vance, walking just behind them. The ceremony just wrapping up, and here we parting as well out outgoing Vice President Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman. As we mentioned, Donald Trump is expected to greet some of the inauguration watchers in the overflow room. That includes, of course, some dignitaries and sitting lawmakers who could not be present in the Capitol Rotunda room because of limited space. But we just saw that wrap up. President Trump promised a flurry of executive actions on day one on immigration, energy production, crime, and other issues. Here you see images of Donald Trump's children, Donald Jr., Ivanka Trump, her husband Jared Kushner. There's Barron Trump as well. And you see Pam Bondi, who is Donald Trump's pick to be Attorney General. We saw her confirmation hearings beginning in Washington just this past week. Katrina, you're on the line as well. Just tell us what you made of Donald Trump's address, his inaugural address.
Indeed, Sumi, we've been watching this obviously here on Capitol Hill, and I think he struck quite a different tone to what we heard in 2017 in that so-called American Carnage speech. Here he's talking about the golden age of America, full of plans that he has for this country, even saying he intends to put American astronauts on Mars during his tenure, which caused a huge smile to break across the face of Elon Musk, of course, the owner of SpaceX, and a very now close friend and confidant of Donald Trump and close advisor. We saw him sitting in amongst the family, indeed, didn't we? It was really interesting, that seating plan where you had members of cabinet mixed in with the family and with those close friends now that Donald Trump has made of people like Mark Zuckerberg, of course, the owner of Meta, and many other of the tech CEOs there. Again, everything noteworthy and unusual really about this inauguration, just as we see everyone leaving there through the halls of the Capitol, moving to the next stage of these sort of formal proceedings. Donald Trump will have an opportunity now to officially sign the nomination papers for those cabinet picks that we've been discussing. Now that he officially is president, he can make those nominations in an official way. Some speculation whether while he's doing that, he may also sign some of those executive orders and memorandums and actions that he was talking about during that speech. I think quite a few eyebrows will have been raised about his intention to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Also, some cultural issues we've been discussing about this affirmation he was talking about, that there were now only 2 genders in official US government business, male and female. But again, full of bright remarks, in contrast to what we heard from him in 2017, saying America's decline is over, he said today. And he also struck some warnings, which were actually quite similar to the warnings we heard from Joe Biden in his farewell address just a couple of days ago, when he was talking about the nexus of power and wealth and how that was concentrated in America and how potentially damaging it was. Well, Donald Trump made exactly the same point during his speech here, so that was quite an interesting note as well. But, you know, he's talking about a tide of change, sunlight pouring all over the entire world. Very, I think, an attempt to be quite statesmanlike and quite presidential in parts of the speech. And then it turned into something of a campaign speech, really, didn't it, where he was making these pledges. We don't often hear those kind of specific things in an inaugural address. We generally hear sort of bigger viewpoints, ideological points and the vision for America, whereas there were quite a lot of specifics here, Sumi, weren't there, in terms of individual policies that Donald Trump, now that he's president, intends to address.
Indeed, Katrina, we certainly did, and we're going to be talking about this as we see the Supreme Court justices just filing out. We saw the leadership of the House and Senate filing out there as well. We saw former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, as she was talking to Donald Trump's children just briefly there as she was leaving the rotunda, as everyone's exiting now, as these that part of the formal proceedings, as you said, Katrina, are moving on. And we'll see Donald Trump move on to the next phase of this inauguration day. As you said, we saw there's Jared Kushner and again his children walking now through that hall and exiting the Capitol Rotunda. Really interesting, as you said, Katrina, that makeup of the first few rows of people who were seated together. I noticed during the benediction when the pastor was speaking, you saw the reaction from Donald Trump, and just 2 rows behind, the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, with a big grin on his face. And we also saw Elon Musk watching closely. Such a fascinating mix of power in politics, tech in politics, really in one room. And to your point on those policies, they had been telegraphed all morning from the Trump team that we were going to see some of these executive orders, as we see some lawmakers here. Senator Chuck Schumer now departing. You can see that hat, of course, Katrina. It is still very cold. You will know because you're on a rooftop at the moment, but the sun is shining as they depart and the inauguration ceremonies continue.
I can testify that it is still very cold here in Washington, D.C., but the sun is shining on our backs, and what more could you wish for than a bit of a sun on your back or even on your face? And, that kind of chimes in with the theme of Donald Trump's speech in many ways, that he views it as a new dawn, a new sunshine for America, referencing sunlight. Even at one point, we're seeing there the Supreme Court justices leaving here and everyone spilling out into the sunshine there. And we can see all the former presidents coming down the steps there out of the shade and into the sunshine there. And we can see, of course, in the middle of that screen on the left, President Donald Trump, the 47th President of America, and his wife Melania Trump, followed by Joe Biden and Jill Biden, of course, now former President Joe Biden and former First Lady Jill Biden. And behind them, just dipped out of shot there, Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance. They're making their way now to this is the next sort of formal part of proceedings, which is the bidding of farewell to Joe Biden. His term in office officially ended at midday Eastern Time here in the US, 5 p.m. in the UK. And so we can see the helicopter there, which Joe Biden and Jill Biden and presumably Kamala Harris, although do we see her there? It's hard to tell from this angle. We'll get into. Well, we're joined on the line now by Brian Lanza, former senior advisor to the Trump-Vance 2024 campaign and also a member of President Trump's 2020-21 presidential transition team, a close advisor of President Trump. We can say it now, it's official, Brian. We were chatting earlier about what might be in that speech and what tone he might set for his presidency. What did you make of what you heard?
Listen, I thought it was a very unifying speech. I mean, you have to remember the country has asked him to come back to Washington, D.C. and implement these radical changes, and it is a unifying message. I think you see the president speaking with a tremendous amount of confidence because he knows he has a team who has the ability to execute on their priorities. It was good to see the president. It was good to see his family, and it's good to see him get right to work. There's a lot to do, and this is a man who's dedicated, to working very hard for the American people. And so it's good that we have these moments of shifting powers here in Washington, D.C., but it's also, we can't lose sight. We're here for the American people. The circumstances and prompts is great, but there's desks that need to be filled with people who need to be working on behalf of all Americans, taxpayers, to make sure that their priorities are being met. And that's the one thing President Trump understands better than anybody else, is that, Washington's not here to work for the politicians. Washington's here to work for America, and that's what he's bringing.
Indeed, he said that in one of his first sentences in the speech, didn't he? He said, "I will very simply put America first." And then he went on to say, our sovereignty will be reclaimed, our safety will be restored, the scales of justice will be rebalanced, and then a number of other specific policy points. Was there a particular highlight from you, something that you heard from him that will stick in your mind from this speech?
Listen, I think truthfully, him talking about, putting the American people first, America first. I mean, I think far too long, whether it's before President Trump was in office the first time or even during these last 8 years, the American people have felt left behind. They felt the corporations, they felt the globalism was sort of, was hurting them, and that Washington, D.C. was not there to service them. And so when President Trump said that clearly and definitively, among the first things that it's America first, I think that's what I wanted to hear. America first doesn't mean America only. America first means that we're prioritizing the resources of the American people to prioritize them here domestically and abroad, and that has a huge impact on foreign policy. You saw some of the foreign policy successes of in the last couple of days when the terrorists got released. Most would say it was President Trump's tweets demanding Hamas release the Americans that sort of prompted this, the hostage negotiation to get restarted. So there's nothing wrong with America first, right? We're a big world, and we will work with others. But I think President Trump, making sure, that we don't have the huge homeless problems that we've had in the last 30 years. During the Biden administration, homelessness has risen 30%. That doesn't sound like America first to me, as we send $200 billion to Ukraine. So I think that people wanted this change. They're going to get it. We're excited about it, and I'm excited to see, my friend, my old boss, President Trump, getting ready to implement change, which this city needs and this country desperately wants.
Right, as you've been speaking, we're seeing these images here as the Bidens are indeed departing, about to get on that helicopter, not riding off into the sunset, if you will. It is, of course, still daytime here in Washington, but these images we see here, them departing, saying goodbye to Donald Trump and Melania Trump. And just a moment ago, we saw the former vice president now, Kamala Harris, departing, giving both Joe and Jill Biden a quite long embrace before they left in a car, in a motorcade to depart. And that is the end of that farewell ceremony for Joe Biden and Jill Biden. And we know that earlier in the day, of course, they did have tea together in the White House as the beginning of this procession, this handover began. Joe Biden was asked if he had written Donald Trump a letter, as is the tradition from an outgoing president to an incoming president, and he said he had. He was asked what was in that letter, and he said, that's between me and Donald Trump. So here now you have the president and vice president, the first lady and second lady there, all standing together as they watch the Bidens depart. And Brian, this really was today the handover as we are used to seeing it, this democratic milestone that was being celebrated as well.
Yeah, no, listen, it's great. It's an important part of our culture. These peaceful transitions of powers. It's great that President Trump's there, that Biden is leaving, that everything's taking place. But I would point out that it is sort of sad to see Joe Biden leave as he pardons his entire family for all their criminal activity on this final day. It's pretty remarkable that they accept the pardon, because that's accepting guilt on their behavior. So that just tells you what we need to know about the last 4 years of Joe Biden's tenure, that it very much was a crime family that got a pardon at the last minute. That's not American. The average American doesn't have access to those things of being wiped free of all their sins. So it's a good, in my view, it's good that he's leaving, because we're ending a dark part of American history where he weaponized the judicial system and he prioritized his friends and families over everybody else. That's not who America is.
Brian, we should just say, of course, that investigations into Joe Biden himself did not turn up any evidence of wrongdoing, nor among the family members who he preemptively pardoned in his final minutes in office today. Yeah, but indeed, this handover has been... Go ahead.
Listen, when you accept a pardon, the U.S. Supreme Court has said when you accept a pardon, you're accepting guilt. So it's very hard to say that investigations have been done clearly. When the family right now, as they're leaving it, they're accepting guilt. What are they accepting guilt of? That would be my question.
Okay, I think we're just seeing if Katrina's still linked up here, but as we're looking at these pictures, of course, of the Bidens departing, we've just seen that departure ceremony, that farewell, the outgoing president and first lady, and the now current president, Donald Trump, and his first lady and vice president and second lady. This is all culminating after the inauguration ceremony that we saw inside the rotunda at the Capitol. Again, all of that was planned very last minute. These ceremonies were moved indoors. They were supposed to be held, as they usually are, in the steps of the Capitol where the swearing-in is held, and with tens of thousands of people watching on the National Mall. And here, this was a different ceremony, but one that had a lot of that pomp and pageantry that we are accustomed to seeing during such a ceremony. And Brian, I want to ask you a bit about what we saw in the actual rotunda and that seating arrangement. It really was remarkable to see members of Donald Trump's family sitting really side by side with some of the titans of the tech industry. What did you make of that?
Listen, I think it's Donald Trump bringing the business community here. It wasn't just tech industry. There were other CEOs there that were there, and I think America is eager for President Trump to engage the business community. I think the last 4 years they haven't felt as engaged The business community hasn't as felt engaged with their government as they felt during Trump tenure. So they're back. They're here to welcome him. They're here to say that America's open for business, and that's a good thing. You saw our cabinet members there. You had a lot of cabinet members who've had successful business careers. Listen, America's open for business, and it's being handled by people who understand business and who want this country to grow. The bureaucrats, I'd say, you keep an eye out because, they're going to be pushed out of this town because it's not about them. It's about the American people. It's about affordability, and it's about their lives. It's not about Washington expanding itself.
Brian, just as we're listening to you there, you can see just over my shoulder here, and you can see on your screens there the helicopter taking off that is carrying now former President Joe Biden and former First Lady Jill Biden. They're literally flying right over our heads there as we're speaking to you now, and that marks the end officially of Joe Biden's official business as President of the United States. That's the last formal involvement for him in that helicopter just taking off now. And he goes on to the next chapter in his life after 5 decades in public service, 36 years as a senator, 8 years as vice president, and of course the last 4 years as president, the 46th President of the United States. And you can see there the flags are flying at full staff on the Capitol. We were talking about that earlier, how they had been at half-mast following the death of Jimmy Carter, but they are back up at full staff upon the request of the Republican Party in honour of the celebration of today, the inauguration of Donald Trump. You can see here we're looking at images coming to us from the overflow part of the US Capitol, because as we've been saying, moving the ceremony inside to the rotunda meant there was a very tight limit on the number of people who could be seated in there. So there are about 1,200 people in this room we're looking at here, which is the visitor center of the Capitol building. It's just behind the Capitol building and underneath a little, just actually quite close to the area that that helicopter just took off from. So all of these people here, staffers, other family and friends, constituents that have been invited by the various Congress people who would normally be in prime seating right in front of the inaugural platform, but on the lower section looking up at those steps where all the principals would be seated. Here they are in the visitor center. Now the plan is for President Donald Trump to make his way to this area here to speak to this gathered audience. We're told he will make remarks of about 10 minutes or so, but we're also told they will be non-scripted. And as we know with Donald Trump, if it's non-scripted and he gets in his flow, he's president now, he will no doubt be setting out some more of those policies that we saw him articulating in the inaugural address just a few moments ago. So there's great excitement in that room, as you can see as well. A big moment for all of these supporters and a big moment in history for the American people. As we heard Donald Trump say, the golden age of America begins right now. He said, from this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again, he said, all over the world. I will very simply put America first. So we're looking at pictures there on the stage, and we can see some of the members there arriving. Senator Deb Fisher, of course, who the lady in the green dress, as you look at her, who was making remarks. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, there as well, all on the stage, awaiting the arrival of Donald Trump, President of the United States, to greet these supporters here who have been viewing the ceremony on a big screen there as it happened not too far from where they are seated in the rotunda, the podium there with the presidential seal of office, awaiting those remarks from President Trump. What he's doing in the meantime, he's as we saw, he's waved off Joe Biden there, and he's now headed back in to the Capitol building. He was not due to hold the signing ceremony until after he spoke to the people gathered here. However, proceedings are running at this point about 20 or 30 minutes, slightly behind schedule. So he may be doing that signing before he comes here. We'll find out about that in just a moment. I want to bring in Margaret Talev. She's senior contributor for Axios, and she is also at Syracuse University. Margaret, you've watched plenty of these inaugural addresses, as we all have. What did you make of that? Actually, I'm just seeing now Speaker Mike Johnson is taking to the podium there, so we might have a listen into what he's saying.
Right now, already this morning, you can feel it around the country. We certainly felt it here in the city. America is coming together and roaring back again, and it begins today, as the president just told us. I know we'd all rather be gathered together on the National Mall with hundreds of thousands of our closest friends, but our disappointment is well overcome with our excitement for the future that we feel today. We have the chance to make the next 4 years the most consequential period in our nation's history. And as Speaker of the House, it is my great pleasure, my great honor, to introduce to you the man who will lead us to this new golden age, the decisive winner of the Electoral College and the popular vote, the 45th and the 47th and the greatest president of our lifetimes, Donald J. Trump.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. And was that a hell of a speech or what? That was, man. That was a good way to start it off. You know, I didn't know exactly what the president would put in that speech, and I hoped to myself that he wasn't going to hold back, and sir, you didn't hold back. That was a hell of a way to start the next 4 years. But I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for the president and for all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you for making this possible. We love you. We wouldn't be here without you, and we're going to make America great again together for the next 4 years. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, having stood outside for about 5 minutes to wave goodbye to the Bidens, thank God we moved that thing indoors, because it was a beautiful ceremony and it was cold as hell outside. So, sir, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
No, he's right. I said, oh, look at this beautiful sunny day. We blew it. And then I went outside and we were freezing. You would have been very unhappy. The sun was very deceptive, I will tell you. It is cold out. And I'm sort of saying, you know, that was so beautiful today. Maybe they should do it there every 4 years. Does that make sense? I don't know. Because, you know, the outdoor thing is really good, but it gets a little cold around this time of the year, as some people have noticed. And a lot of times they suffer through it. There was no suffering in that room. It was 72 degrees. It was perfect with the best acoustics I think I've ever heard in a room. This is not so bad either. But I just want to say, you're a younger, far more beautiful audience that I just spoke to. And I want to keep it off the record. I want to keep that off the record because I don't want to have all those big shots up there. I don't want to think you're more powerful than them. You look better than them, and I love you. Now, we just had a great time. We just had a great day. This was amazing. You know, when you think we took a journey I mentioned in the speech, a lot of people said that was not a journey that was possible, and it was indeed possible. I didn't really know too much about what they were saying when they said that, but a lot of people felt it. And we hooked up with J.D. very early. I watched J.D. over a period of time. I endorsed him in Ohio. He was a great senator and very, very smart. The only one smarter than him was his wife. That was I would have chosen her, but somehow the line of succession didn't work that way, right? But now she's great and he's great. This is a great, beautiful couple and unbelievable career. I just said to him, you are very upwardly mobile, because he hasn't been doing it that long, but he picked it up so quickly. Remember, the first week was a little bit like the fake news was hitting him really hard. And I said, oh, this may be tough, but after that, it was smooth sailing for him. He took on everybody. He took on the meanest. I don't want to use the word corrupt because we're into a new system, so let's wait till the corruption begins, because it will. But he took on some pretty mean people, and he handled it well. I want to also congratulate Mike Johnson for the job that he's doing. See, we gave him a majority of almost nothing, and then I said, to make it tougher on him, let me take 2 or 3 of the people, right? I said, he'll only have to suffer with that for about 3 months. How are they doing, by the way? Are they? Is that moving along?
Totally unified.
I said, do you mind if I take this one, that one, and a couple of others? He didn't mind. He can handle it. No, he's a man that's liked by everybody. I've never met a man like this. You've got how many is it, 219 or 220 or something? 220. And of the 220, 219 really like him. I noticed he got 1 negative vote once about 2 weeks ago. But I think even 220 like him, if you want to know the truth. And that's very unusual. I know a lot of nice guys in Congress, and they have 35 people that hate him. So if you have 35 people that hate you and you only have 1 or 2 or 3 votes, you'll have 5, I think. But that's going to be like, the good news is when we get to that 5 number, it's going to feel like a massive majority. You could be really nasty to a couple of them at least, So it's going to feel like hitting your head on the wall and stopping. It feels so good to stop. But he's done a fantastic job. And Steve Scalise he's our hero because, I was with him. You talk about being shot. I was with him. He got some bad ones, and his incredible wife, and she really loves him. You never know about that. I've been with other people that were doing poorly, and the wife is like looking at a watch. She can't get out of the hospital fast enough. How's he doing? Oh, I don't know. He's all right. That woman was a mess. She was crying and crying. No, they're going to take him. They're going to take him. I told Steve when he finally woke up, it was a while, too. The doctor told me it was the most blood they've ever transfused in any patient. They've never done anything like it. And here he is, the picture of strength, right? And he's been a great friend of mine, right? With a family, because of a family. And what a job you did. It worked out pretty much better than we even thought, right? And I did have a couple of things, to say that were extremely controversial. And between J.D. and Melania and anybody else that heard, please, sir, it's such a beautiful, unifying speech. Please, sir, don't say these things. I said, I'm telling you, it's going to play great. They say, you're right. For this group of people, it's going to play great. You're the only ones I hurt by not, but we had some beauties, didn't we, Melania? She said, sir, calls me sir when she's angry. No, I'm only kidding. I better say I'm only kidding, or the press is going to pick that one up loud and clear. No, but she said, no, I think it would be terrible. It's such a nice speech. I think it's, it all depends on your delivery. How was the delivery? Was it good? But she said it's such a beautiful speech. You can't put things in there that you were going to put in. And I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because, it's action, not words that count. And you're going to see a lot of action on the J6 hostages. See a lot of action. And I was going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes, like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, where they literally, I mean, what they did is they destroyed and deleted all of the information, all of the hearings, practically not a thing left. They deleted all the information on Nancy Pelosi having turned down the offer of 10,000 soldiers. You wouldn't have needed 10,000. You could have had 500, and it would have stopped. Because we may have had 1 million people that day, the people that were there. You don't see any photographs, but we have a lot of great photos. But you don't see those photographs. They don't put them in. They show the people at the Capitol. But I was talking about that. I was going to talk about that. They said, please don't bring that up right now. You can bring it up tomorrow. I said, how about now in front of the I'll bring it up right now. You know, this little time delay is good because we're getting great reviews on the speech. Now watch. They'll take the speech and say, I didn't like it because he left there and he's talked to people. But we're giving you a little more information than we gave upstairs. But no, they pardoned a lot of people. They pardoned, before we even get to today, they pardoned, 33 murderers, absolute murderers, the worst murderers. You know, when you get the death sentence in the United States, you have to be bad because they don't give it much. And he pardoned almost everybody having a death sentence. And if you went through the crimes that were committed, you wouldn't even believe them, the level of violence, the people that were killed, the innocence of people that were killed, and children killed by these people. And he pardoned them for whatever reason. He spared them, but they didn't spare the people that they killed. And, you know, who knows what happens in the future. It's one of the worst because a lot of times they let them out early after that. You know, they say you're going to be in for life, but then all of a sudden they get let out for good behavior, and then they go on a rampage. You know, it's one of those little things, right? But I was going to talk about that. But I was really going to talk about the level of, you know, what's going on. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to help a guy like Milley? Why are we doing Milley? He was pardoned. What he said, terrible what he said. Why are we helping some of the people? Why are we helping Liz Cheney? I mean, Liz Cheney is a disaster. She's a crying lunatic and crying Adam Kinzinger. He's a super crying. I never saw the guy not crying. He's always crying. I looked at him. I remember years ago he was actually on my side. And then one day, you know, when you don't want to kill people in wars, they turn against you. Liz Cheney hated the concept of not going to war with everybody. Let's kill everybody. Let's spend a lot of money on military equipment, you know, where her father works, right? And but what she did was incredible. Think of it. They destroyed and deleted all of that information that went on for almost 2 years against Trump. And the reason they did, because it was all false. Like the person that said, I tried to strangle a Secret Service agent. That's one of the toughest human beings I think I've ever seen. I actually had a friend saying, please don't change that, sir. You are the coolest sucker in history. Remember, she said, I put my hands around his neck because he wouldn't go to the Capitol. Made up fiction. And I was rebuffed. And the guy on the right is a massive weightlifter, probably stronger than me. Do you think he's stronger than me, honey? You know who I'm talking about. Possibly stronger than me. Slightly younger than me, like, I won't say how many years because I don't want to talk about that, but a lot of years. But I had a friend that said, why are you disputing that story? That's the coolest story I've ever heard. That I would attack a karate champion, get slightly rebuffed, and then throw my arms around a guy with a neck about this big. Even though there are bars, you know, there are bars, you can't really do that anyway. So I wanted to talk about that. But all of that stuff got deleted. And the reason it got deleted is they were all caught in lies. You know, Secret Service testified, and they said it didn't happen. Actually, the two guys were very embarrassed. They're suffering because their friends are saying, did Trump really do that to you? But they gained a whole new respect for me. But it was just make-believe stuff, and there were a lot of make-believe stories made up. So rather than suffer the wrath, like the story with Nancy Pelosi, I offered her 10,000 soldiers. She knows it. She admitted it on tape that her daughter made. She's a videographer or whatever you call her, which I'm glad she is. Oh, she can't be in good stead with Nancy. But Nancy said it was my responsibility as she's leaving the Capitol. She said it was, and it was. She's in charge of security at the Capitol. But I offered them up to 10,000 soldiers, even more. One time I said more, as many as you need. But you needed 400 or 500. If 4 or 5, you 10,000, that would be more than the number of people there by lot. But we offered her 10,000. Think of it, 10,000 soldiers. In other words, J6 wouldn't be J6. There would have been no J6. But she rebuffed them. She didn't like it. No, she didn't like it. Maybe she wanted that to happen. But she's guilty as hell. And now we would have to go through the process because they destroyed all evidence. They deleted everything. There's virtually nothing left. The other fake story and so many other fake stories. And many people came out on our side. And those people now would got to find them. There's nothing left. So that's a criminal offense. If that were a civil case, it would be a criminal offense. If that happened civilly where you did that, it would be a criminal offense. So I decided I'm not going to make this speech complicated. I'm going to make it beautiful. I'm going to make it a unifying speech. And then when they said we have a group of people that are serious Trump fans, I said, this is the time to tell those stories. He knows. So anyway, but seriously, I'd like to, I think it was a tremendous success. I think we're very lucky we put it inside because it is really cold. We just went to the helicopter out of respect to something that's taken place for a long time. I guess it's as old as helicopters. You used to get into a stagecoach, now you get into a helicopter. Times change. But it's pretty old custom. And it's a beautiful custom, actually. It's a beautiful custom. I wish we could have had a better relationship. I wish we could have had a better relationship between Republicans and Democrats. I was with Senator Schumer. I said, Chuck, I think it's time we all start getting along a little bit because it doesn't make sense. I mean, we literally never get a Democrat vote. They never get a Republican vote, almost. And although there is a bill coming up very shortly that we have a lot of Democrat votes, right? That's going to be a very beautiful bill. We're going to have a deciding, I would say, within a week or so, I think. And it's going to be a very good bill. You all know what I'm talking about. So I just want to thank you all for being here. You have been our fans from day one. All these people all over. You've been our fans. This has been there's never been anything like it. There's never been anything like it. This has been a movement like no movement ever in history for probably any country, let alone this country. You know, if somebody's running for president, and if they go out and they announce they're going to Arizona, they're going to Nevada, they're going to someplace, if you have 200 or 300 people, that would be standard. Ronald Reagan would go out. I mean, outside of the last couple of days where people get a little excited, but even then you have a couple of thousand people. But if you're going to go someplace, any place, any one of the swing states, any one of the other states, I mean, how about the non-swing states? We won Alabama by 48 points. We won Tennessee by massive numbers. Wyoming, we won by numbers that are, nobody's ever seen numbers like that. And, you know, places like California, we did great, but when they send out like 38 million ballots, nobody knows where the hell they're sending them, and then they come pouring back, the whole thing. You know, they passed a law in California that if you work in an election bureau and if you so much as ask for a voter ID, if you say, sir, ma'am, could I please look at your voter ID? They have the right to put you in jail. You're a criminal. Can you believe that? There's only one reason that happens. They want to cheat. So they had it where voter ID wasn't accepted. But now if you even ask for it, this is seriously a bill that was just signed, passed in their legislature, and it was signed. And I think when we get things cleaned up and we get back to a little bit of normalcy, I'm going to ask the Speaker to really get involved because I think we would have won the state of California because, you know, if you look at my numbers with Hispanic, we're at 56% and we won the Texas border that had never been won. As the governor said, he's doing a good job, the governor, by the way, of Texas. But as the governor said, it hasn't. Oh, did I get lucky? Did I get lucky? Supposing I said, you know, he's not here, but the governor of Texas has done a terrible job. Wow, look at you. You mean we couldn't get you up in the front row? I'll tell you. Supposing I said, J.D., the governor of Texas is not doing his job. You heard what I said. See, I didn't know you were there. I said he's doing a great job. He's doing a phenomenal job. But now you're going to have a partner that's going to work with you because you didn't have, not only didn't he have a partner, he had people selling the wall, right? We have a fence structure that we worked on, the governor worked on with me. And I didn't love it, to be honest with you. I wanted a nice precast concrete, 40, 50 feet high, like a beautiful, could have been a T-shape, Y-shape. I love construction. I wanted that sucker to go up maybe 50, 60 feet. It would have looked beautiful, a nice Y shape. And they said, the problem is, sir, they climbed that like a rabbit. I said, what do you mean? No way. And they brought some of these guys out. They climbed it like... And the other thing is you hit it with acid and the thing will disintegrate. They have things for concrete. So they needed very hardened steel, very special steel. And then they needed 7,000-pound concrete inside that steel, inside that steel. And then they have a rebar that's the toughest steel made. Very hard to cut. So this is why very little is cut. I mean, it's right. And then they put a anti-climb panel on top. I hated it. I said, it's so unattractive. And I said, why would that work? I don't believe it works. And I went to watch the Border Patrol, gave a display. We had actually two sets of climbers. The guys that climb up walls with drugs on their back, I mean, they got like 60, 70 pounds of drug, and they go as fast as you can walk. They go bip, bip, bip. Or we have Mount Everest-type climbers. And honestly, the drug guys were much better. I couldn't believe it. The drug guys blew them away, right? But it's true, the anti-climb panel, they couldn't get around it. They just couldn't. You didn't have it. So sometimes you sacrifice beauty for efficiency. And we did. So we built this wall, and we built over 500 miles of wall. That's why we had such good numbers. The famous chart that came down, very thankfully, the chart that came down on my right, Governor, had I not looked over there, I'm not speaking right now. You might be speaking here. You want to know the truth? You, J.D., and we've got a lot of great people in this party, but I got very lucky, but we had the best numbers we've ever had. But I bought, what happens is when you fill it up, it's like water. You fill it up. Now we have 571 miles of wall. And they would always say, when we renovated a wall, so there'd be like a piece of plywood sitting there for 60 years, or a 2x4 sitting for 60 years on the ground and rotting. Because, and they'll say, you didn't build a new wall. Here we're building 50 feet up in the air, 30 feet sections, 50-foot sections, all steel, all concrete, all everything. And all, by the way, they don't even want me to say this, but what the hell, doesn't take that long time. They were all wired for all of the equipment. We put wires in everything so they can easily wire for all the different types of equipment. And if there's a doubt, we have to wire. Whenever we just look, you just find the wires all over the place up top, so we could just hook it up. We don't have to have wires on the outside, which wouldn't do too well, right? So anyway, so we built an extra 200 miles of wall, and the governor wanted to buy it. He tried to buy it, and they wouldn't sell it to him. He wanted to put it up himself. Could have been done in 3 to 4 weeks, 200 more miles, because when you do it now, they just keep going further out, getting around. So we did an extra 200 miles, and it was all bought. And they announced that they're not going to put it up. And that's when I realized they wanted open borders, and that's when I realized that people are going to come pouring through the wall like nobody's ever seen before. But you've seen it. A lot of you are here because of that. I made it my #1 issue. They all said inflation was the #1 issue. I said I disagree. I think people coming into our country from prisons and from mental institutions is a bigger issue for the people that I know. And I made it my #1. I talked about inflation too, but how many times can you say that an apple has doubled in cost? I'd say it, and I'd hit it hard, but then I go back to the fact that we don't want criminals coming into our country. We don't want the jails of every country in the world virtually being deposited into the United States. And that man had to suffer with it. And he did an unbelievable job. I'll tell you, he was a very popular governor, but now he's like an unbeatable governor because of your border policies. He was fantastic. And he really was. So. Governor Abbott he's a great man, a great leader. And but it did make him very more. Did you do it? You didn't do that for politics. You did it because you wanted to do the right thing. But I'll tell you, it sure as hell worked for politics too. It's self-preservation. That's right. But no, because the people are demanding it. The people of Texas are demanding it. The people are demanding it all over. So anyway, so we built it, and they wouldn't let us use it. They wouldn't let the governor use it, and other governors, they wouldn't let him use it. But he was the leader of the pack and did a great job. And then we heard about a month ago that not only wouldn't they let us use it, they were selling it. They were going to sell it for 5 cents on the dollar. Now, 5 cents on the dollar then, but today it would cost more than twice as much to build because we bought it like 6 years ago. And it was just sitting on the ground, and that does not do well for the whole thing. But it was just sitting on the ground, and I heard about it, and I called the governor, and I called a lot of people, your attorney general. And here's the story. They were going to buy it, and these are great business people. They were going to buy it for 5 cents on the dollar or less, and they were calling us up, we'll sell it to you for 200 cents on the dollar. In other words, it will cost you twice as much, so it's 200 cents on the dollar. I said, can somebody explain that to a judge? I mean, how corrupt is that? You'd think they'd say, maybe we'll sell it to you for 20 cents, 30 cents, but not 200 cents. So they were going to buy something for 5 cents, and they were going to sell it to us for a fortune. They were going to make it would be, they'd have it down that in Fortune magazine, they'd put it of the deal of the year, okay? You buy something like that. But it was so corrupt and so horrible. And when we told that to the administration, they didn't care. They just kept going forward. They couldn't care less. And they kept going forward. They knew that they were trying to sell it back to us. They would have sold it back to us. You would have ended up buying it. You would have paid probably 50, 60 cents. Who knows? But they were going to use it for scrap metal, but then they made a much better deal. They could just buy it and sell it to us for 15, 20 times what they paid. 20 times, think of it, like 20 times what they paid. And we wouldn't let it happen. And the governor with his attorney general, Ken Paxton, they made a fantastic, they're a good lawyer. He's pushed around pretty good by people, right? I said, you got a great attorney general. They should leave him alone. He was with me. But Ken and the governor went to court, and a judge actually became incensed and actually called for an investigation. How could a thing like this happen? So he stopped it. So we're waiting to put that wall up. And now that you have a new president, that wall will go up so fast. The governor will complain, sir. This is Greg Abbott, sir. Please, the wall is going up too fast. Please don't do that. You know the story about winning. No, we're going to win too much. We're winning too much. Please, stop. People always love that one. We'll do this with the wall. Governor Abbott calls, sir, the wall is going up too fast. We can't take it. We just can't take it. No, I think you'll be very happy if the wall goes up too fast, right? But we'll get that done, and we'll work with you on that. But it was a great decision by a great Texas judge, right? And it was beautiful, beautiful to watch. He stopped them right in their track. I mean, they were literally loading this stuff onto trucks. It was terrible. Honestly, it was terrible. And he wouldn't take it. So I'm so glad I mentioned that they have a really good governor in Texas. And I swear, I didn't know he was here. I swear to you, it sounds like a setup. I didn't know you would end. Did I get lucky? I said the right thing. Because there have been moments when I wasn't so happy with him, you know? But not too many, I can tell you that. So anyway, it's good to see you too, Governor. Great. But I just want to thank everybody. You've been incredible. I recognize so many of you. It's so crazy. But this has been a long journey. This was a journey that started in 2015, probably started 20 years before that. People used to say, you're going to run for president? You're going to run? And I always said, no, I don't want. And then one day I said, let's give it a shot. And what I talked about then was the border, too. I think it probably was the #1 issue for me. Back in 2015, 2016, I talked about the border. And now I talked about the border, but this border is much worse. We fixed the border. It was totally fixed. There was nothing to talk about. 2020, by the way, that election was totally rigged, but that's okay. It was a rigged election. You know the only thing good about it? It showed how bad they are, showed how incompetent, and frankly, historically, this is a much bigger event. If that would have gone like it should have. The bad thing about it is some bad things happened, like a lot of people in our country that wouldn't be in our country right now. So, you know, that's the bad part. But I will say that it started in 2015, and right from the beginning, we went to the top. Day one, they announced Trump, and Trump went to number one and stayed there for the whole primary. And then we took on Hillary. She didn't look too happy today. We took on Hillary. A very nice person, but we took on Hillary and we defeated Hillary, and then we did much better the second time in 2020. You know, we got millions more votes. We got millions, like 10, 12 million more votes than we did the first time. No president has ever gotten that many more votes. I got like 9 million more than anybody else had ever gotten, and they said we lost. And because of that, I said to Melania, what do you think? And she said, you want to do this again? And had we lost, and had I thought we lost, I wouldn't do it again, because that's like the ultimate poll, right? But I knew how well we did, and this time we made it too big to rig. It was so big. They tried. They tried like hell in the butt. They tried to do it, and around 9:02, they gave up. Last time they did bad things, but this time they just said, yes. You know, I don't know if you saw, Mr. Speaker, in Washington, they had placards. They were all set to march. They thought it'd be closer. A gentleman asked me, a very respected gentleman asked me yesterday, how come the polls were so wrong? They showed you winning, but not in a landslide. I said, because people that are true Trumpers are so angry at the whole polling system and at the writers, the fake news, that they don't want to talk to anybody. So when you call somebody from Trump, who are you voting for? They say, it's none of your business. I'm not telling you. And that was probably 40% of the people they called. So they would discard that one, and they didn't show that. And then when the election happened, you know, the vote came, and it was much different, much higher than we're going to win, but they really thought, they couldn't believe, the one man said, I mean, it was so much higher. We won all 7 swing states. We won the popular vote by millions of votes, which is hard for a Republican. I'll tell you who came through. The unions came through. The auto workers were great. The Teamsters were great. The firemen were great. I think almost every union was great. The only one that weren't great, although Sean was great, and the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters, was fantastic. But generally speaking, the head of the union was against Trump, but the union would be with us for like 80, 85%. Look what we did with the auto workers in Michigan. Look what we did with the Teamsters. The Teamsters were unbelievable. They were a solid Democrat vote, and they voted for Trump. So we had a great experience. Now we have to go to work and get it done, because we have to do something that's going to be great. We're going to turn our country around. And we're going to turn it around fast. And I think this was a better speech than the one I made upstairs, okay? I think this was better, JD. I think this was much better. And I got to see my friend. So, Governor, take care of yourself. You call me, we'll start working. You know what that means with him? He's going to be calling me tomorrow morning at about 6. And I said, how about next week? You call me and we're going to get it started real fast. We'll really help you a lot. You've done a fantastic job protecting something which it's not supposed to be for the states. And amazing job you've done. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody. And I have a First Lady who's been incredible. She's been incredible. I shouldn't say this. I'm going to get hell when I say this, but her feet are absolutely aching, you know, those heels. And we thought we were leaving. We were going home. Sir, would you be able to go down and say hello to some of your other fans that are here? I said, oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Did you get to see pretty clearly the picture, I hope? Good. That's good. But because you wouldn't want to make the same speech again, right? But she said, darling, I love you so much, but my feet are killing me. I said, honey, let me just see how far it is. I asked the person. Oh, not that long, maybe 400 or 500 yards. That's 5 football fields. I said, can you make it? She said, we're going to make it no matter what. We're going to make it because we have to go. Right? Right? And then we went out to the helicopter, though, just prior to this and said goodbye. And it's a custom. And the wind is blowing like crazy. And with the hat that she's wearing, she almost blew away. We almost lost off her. She was being elevated off the ground. She almost blew away. No. So we all appreciate it because you've been a great First Lady. A beautiful and a great First Lady. And they love our First Lady. You know, JD, whenever I make a speech, I see hundreds of times, we love our First Lady. We love, and they do, and they should. She's great. So I just want to thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody. And I felt that, I said to JD, should we give him the A treatment, the B treatment, the C, the D, or the F? You know what the F is? Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye. I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Governor. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
President Donald Trump there just making some unscripted remarks to individuals who had been gathered in a separate area of Capitol Hill watching his inauguration, because moving the ceremony inside to the rotunda meant there weren't enough seats to accommodate everyone. So there are about 1,800 people watching in Emancipation Hall here in the Visitor Centre. We've just heard, it was supposed to be about 10 minutes. I think it was about 25 minutes there of remarks from President Donald Trump, joking that he was speaking to the younger and far more beautiful crowd downstairs than he had been upstairs. And he went through quite a different speech to what we heard upstairs. In fact, as I say, this was unscripted and off the cuff, stopping at one point to ask those gathered how his delivery was. Was it any good? He said he mentioned the January 6th individuals who have been charged and convicted following the attack on Capitol Hill, of course, in January 2021. And he said he would be announcing something on that later, that it was action, not words, and that there would be a lot of action later. He singled out two members of the committee, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, individuals on the committee, of course, that we saw President Joe Biden issue preemptive pardons for this morning, and President Donald Trump referring to that and referring to the criminal actions of those involved in the committee. Of course, those on the committee are not accused, charged or convicted of any criminal actions. Those remarks made by the president just now. And he also stated once again that the 2020 election was totally rigged. Of course, that also is something that there is no evidence for. And he went on to talk about the various vote tallies that he had received over the years, referring to his landslide victory. He won by 2 million votes in 2024, Joe Biden beating him by 7 million votes in 2020. President Trump also singling out the Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, in the crowd there, expressing his shock that Governor Abbott had watched the ceremony, in fact, from this overflow room and not from the main arena. But then he engaged in a long passage of remarks there about his intention to further build the wall along the Mexico-Texas border. And of course, we heard him outline a number of remarks and initiatives about that in his inaugural address a little later. A split-screen moment going on while we were listening to President Trump there. At the same time, you will have been watching pictures of President Biden departing from Air Force Base, Joint Base Andrews, just outside Washington, D.C. here in Maryland. And he stopped to make a few remarks at the same time that President Trump was speaking. Very brief, and he said, "We're leaving office, but we're not leaving the fray." He encouraged the crowd to stay engaged and take care of each other. Then he walked up the stairs of the plane and waved to the crowd. And from this moment on, it's all about President Donald Trump. You can see him there being swarmed by well-wishers, stopping for conversations and photographs and selfies with those gathered in the hall, many of them elected representatives and also supporters and some constituents. I want to bring in now Margaret Talev, senior contributor for Axios and also the director of the Institute for Journalism and Democracy at Syracuse University. Margaret, we were about to speak to you just before Speaker of the House Mike Johnson began introducing their J.D. Vance and then Donald Trump. A return to form really in those unscripted remarks just now to that gathered crowd, and in contrast slightly to what we heard from him earlier.
I'm glad that we waited, because we did get to see the full picture of the messages that now President Trump wanted to send today. And you're so right. I mean, the official remarks, the ones that his team wanted him to give, he talks about American decline being over, a golden age just beginning. He envisions a colorblind society that's merit-based. Many of the things he said in that speech are controversial or not unanimous in terms of how Americans might perceive them. The idea that there's only going to be 2 genders according to the federal government now, and some of the other issues. But go from there to what we just watched afterwards, which, as President Trump said, was the speech he actually wanted to give all along. The relitigation of January the 6th, renewing calls to build the wall, renewing the conspiracy theory that the 2020 election was rigged when it wasn't. He said that Hillary Clinton was in the audience and didn't look too happy. I mean, it was just like on and on and on. And I think this gives us perhaps a preview of the challenge, or one of the narrative threads that we will be watching. He is promising, he and his advisors, to come out of the gate with something like 100 executive orders. He wants to take immediate steps to get things done, but he will be pulled by his own instinct to relitigate the past, to go after his grievances, and kind of to hold court. And it's hard to move fast and look backward at the same time. One other thing I'd note, I was really interested in this part, in this impromptu remarks. He disputed the idea that inflation was truly the issue that was driving Americans to the polls when he won the election in November. He said he doesn't really think inflation was the #1 issue. He thinks it's the border. That's not what polling tells us. What polling tells us is that the big unifying lead bipartisan issue for voters was their dissatisfaction over inflation and the price of goods and the diminished value of the money. And that border issues were much more of a top concern just for the Republican base. But if this is, I would take note of the fact that he's saying that. I think he's saying it for a reason. One is going to be, it may be harder to decline inflation now that he's in office than it was to talk about declining inflation on the campaign trail. But the other is that we're going to see a lot of emphasis on immigration in these early days and weeks of the administration, on expanding executive power to make swift immigration moves without congressional votes. And I think his comments here sort of presaged this series of orders and moves that are about to start unfolding.
And given that we've learned a little bit more on both of those occasions that we've heard from President Trump today about just what he intends, of course, there's a third set of remarks coming a little bit later when he goes to the Capital One Arena, where 20,000 of his supporters have gathered for the presidential parade that will be now indoors, and they will hear from President Trump there as well. Stay with us there, Margaret. I'll be back to you in a moment, but I want to go over to Riyadh now to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Lise, you were listening into the inaugural address earlier to see just what he might say in relation to the Middle East and that broader foreign policy. And of course, he discussed the deal, mentioning that some hostages had already been released, and there was a standing ovation to that. What did you make of what he said?
It was very interesting, and you've been emphasizing this already, Katrona, in this special, is that this was very much an emphasis on America first, make America great again. The golden era starts here. And you'll remember that before, during the election campaign, he said, I want to stop all the wars, not start them, because I want to concentrate on issues at home. And so not a lot of time was spent in what was regarded as quite a long inauguration speech, but he repeated again that he wanted to stop wars, and then suddenly remembered that just the day before, on the 19th, that people had made good on his threat that they had to do a deal, that there had to be a Gaza ceasefire, hostages had to start coming home before he entered the White House again. And so it was. And he took aim at the Biden administration in saying this spending of unlimited amounts of our money to defend foreign borders abroad when we can't even defend our borders at home has got to stop. He emphasized how, he said, we want to be the strongest military in the world. We want to be respected and admired. But we want to end wars, and we don't want to start them. In other words, the message he seems to be saying is, as he will believe he did with just by the power of his words and the presence of his envoy, Steve Witkoff, at the table, he was able to bring about a deal and didn't have to use force. I think he's hoping that simply the threat of American military might, and of course he described himself as a peacemaker, a unifier. He didn't mention his ambition to get a Nobel Peace Prize, but he must think that it is by virtue of this that they can make progress in ending the wars, not just in the Middle East, of course. He would be referring to Ukraine and to any other parts of the world where there are conflicts, where the United States of America has some kind of presence and can have some kind of sway. So it's quite clear, at least what he wants to see, but we've been saying repeatedly, Catriona, it's going to be a lot more difficult once he actually rolls up his sleeves and gets on with the job. He's going to find out that being a peacemaker, as he wants to be, is a lot more difficult once you get down to the detail.
And Lise, it's interesting you mentioned there the idea of American military money being spent to secure borders elsewhere. I mean, we heard from President Trump in the rally yesterday. He was querying why the US was paying so much money towards Afghanistan and other countries for their stability. How do you think all of these remarks are being received in the capitals in the region where you are now?
Yes, he did. He mentioned yesterday he wants all the American military equipment back. The Taliban have been very proudly performing parades with all of their shiny military equipment that was left behind in the withdrawal that President Trump has lambasted President Biden so many times for. I mean, never mind that it was President Trump who started that speedy withdrawal. It's just that Biden finished it, and finished it more quickly than perhaps he should. Well, that's what many believe, and the evidence is there to corroborate that, because it was a disaster. It was a debacle for the United States, which has left a very lasting legacy, including that military equipment that President Trump says now he wants back. He's even said he wants to take back the military air base at Bagram so that America has another position in the region. In Afghanistan, which of course America wants to forget about, President Biden didn't want to talk about it at all after the pullout. There are many who are now hoping. The National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, is a veteran of the Afghan war. They're hoping that America will engage there again. But I think it won't be the top of his priorities. And of course, in Ukraine, they're watching very nervously because they know about his close relationship with President Trump, and they don't want to have to make territorial concessions. But like here, the Ukrainians, and I have to say in many parts of the world, are saying, well, actually, it wasn't working with President Biden. There was a minister here in the Gulf when I asked him a few weeks ago, are you ready for President Trump? He said, listen, at least someone will at least make decisions. And what they saw with the Gaza ceasefire deal, President Trump being willing to use America's force in a way, power of persuasion, threat of action in a way President Biden didn't. They're hoping that this will be used, of course, in a way that benefits them. And it's going to be hard for him to choose between, for example, Saudi Arabia, where I am now. They're saying if you want us to normalize with Israel, you have to have a path to a Palestinian state. Prime Minister Netanyahu would like to normalize with Saudi Arabia, but he doesn't want a Palestinian state. He's very proud to boast that he's done everything possible to stop it.
Okay, Lise Doucette, thank you so much for bringing us that analysis and reaction on this day, the inauguration of President Donald Trump. Thank you so much. Well, just while we've been speaking to Lise there, we can see images of the congressional luncheon where these people ready for the congressional luncheon before President Trump arrives there. We've been looking at images. We can just see on our screen there, of course, Pete Hegseth, who is the pick for Defense Secretary. We also see Ivanka Trump there in the front of the shot, to the back of her head. You can just see there wearing the beret, speaking to Patrick Clyburn. And a number of the other cabinet picks are there. Doug Burgum, just out of shot, of course, picked as Secretary of the Interior. And that was another issue that we heard Donald Trump focus quite a lot of his inaugural address on, rolling back, he said, a lot of these regulations, and his trademark chant, drill, baby, drill. I'm not sure those words have ever been heard in an inaugural address before. This might be the first time for that. But Lise was talking there about the impact of his presidency and his words so far today, and what that will mean for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we can go now to Russia to speak to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg. Steve, there was a line in the inaugural address, which Lise mentioned there as well, about bringing an end to the defence of foreign borders, that there shouldn't be unlimited funding coming from the US government for that reason. How will this speech have been received, do you think, in Moscow?
Yeah, it's interesting. There was no mention of Russia or Ukraine or the war in Ukraine in that inaugural address. Yes, Trump did call himself a peacemaker, someone who wants to stop wars and prevent America from getting involved in wars, but no clues there about how he's going to help to end the war in Ukraine. And I think the things to watch for now will be when will we get that first phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Some reports have suggested it could come within days, and possibly a meeting between the two presidents within a few months. It'll be interesting to see, now that Donald Trump is in office, what actions are taken. Will his new envoy to Ukraine, to the region, Keith Kellogg, start making trips, start talking to officials? Will we get the contours now of Donald Trump's peace plan, if there is a peace plan yet, for Ukraine? It'd be very interesting, but it's clear already that Donald Trump realizes it's not going to be easy to end the war in Ukraine. I mean, a few months ago, he was talking about how basically he could wave a magic wand and end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours of coming to power. That's gone, and now Donald Trump's advisors are talking about several months. So the time frame has already slipped, and it's going to be quite difficult, I think, to do something. But the Russians, I have to say, are cautiously optimistic that things are going to change to their benefit now that Donald Trump is in the White House, because now America has a president who is ready to engage with Vladimir Putin, ready to speak to Putin on the phone, ready to meet Putin. Joe Biden wasn't prepared to do that for the last 3 years. He thought that would send the wrong signal about the war in Ukraine. And also, the Kremlin knows that America now has a president who, on the campaign trail, never voiced public criticism of Vladimir Putin, despite Russia's war in Ukraine. And just a few days ago, Donald Trump actually came out and expressed sympathy with Russia's opposition to Ukraine ever becoming a member of NATO. That is the source of optimism, I think, for the Kremlin.
Okay, Steve Rosenberg there in Moscow, our Russia editor. Thank you for joining us with that analysis. And of course, we'll see how this all unfolds over the days, weeks, months and years ahead. I want to go back to our panelists now. Rodney Davis, former Republican congressman from Illinois, and Stephanie Murphy, former Democratic congresswoman from Florida. Rodney, to you first. You were watching that speech. You've managed to make your way out to the camera there. What's your reaction or response to what you heard from President Donald Trump?
Well, I think Donald Trump gave a speech that was a lot more disciplined than what I thought it would be. I figured he would ad-lib a little more like he did at the RNC, make that speech a little longer, but he stuck to the script. Now, he went off the script when he went and spoke to a bunch of supporters in an overflow room afterwards, but he stuck to the script. And when he mentioned drill, baby, drill, there's probably not one thing more that America can do to lower the inflationary pressures than to become energy independent, to continue to grow our energy sources and export them. So that was one instance among many others where I thought he was doing his best during that short speech to address the top issues that the voters who said they voted for him and for J.D. Vance and Republicans to have the House and the Senate, he spoke directly to those supporters, which is exactly what every president does during their inaugural speech.
There are a couple of surprises in there as well. Sorry, Rodney, just going to interrupt you there because we're looking at pictures there alongside you with Donald Trump doing a signing ceremony in Capitol Hill. Of course, some of this is what they have to do once someone has become president. There's official work, but let's have a listen in to see just what he's signing and see if he tells us what he's at there.
Okay. The next one will be, excuse me. The next one will be 47 sub-cabinet level appointments, sir.
But you don't have to sign 47.
So what we're watching there is President Donald Trump signing some of the official documents that have to be signed when you become president. It's making the official nominations for those who will be in his cabinet. So we've been talking for the last few weeks and months about the individuals that he has picked to serve alongside him. They then have been having hearings in the last week with senators grilling many of them, in fact, as to what qualifications they have and what they may bring to the position. And now that Donald Trump is officially president, he's making those nominations official, so the official part of that process can happen and votes can be held. And we were hearing from Senator Ron Johnson in Wisconsin a little earlier that he felt there would be at least one vote on one of those nominations held today. So we see Donald Trump. Let's have a listen in. Can we hear what he's saying?
We have a proclamation ordering that on all future inauguration days, including this inauguration day, that flags shall be flown at full mast. Very important.
Now on inauguration day, flags will fly at full mast. That's in relation to... Can we listen to what he's saying?
Put this out with maybe something to think about.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good acoustics. Yes.
All right. Now thank you. We go to lunch.
Great.
Very nice to reach out. Thank you very much. Go. Take that.
That last memo that he just signed there, of course, Jimmy Carter, former president, passed away on the 29th of December, and accordingly President Joe Biden had ordered that flags be flown at half-mast for 60 days. That would take into account today, the inauguration day, but the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and indeed the governors of some Republican states ordered the flags to be flown at full mast. So President Donald Trump has just signed an order to make that the official business from here out. Let's try and see if we can hear what else he's saying there.
Unfortunate that he did that. We won't discuss it now. There's plenty of time to discuss it.
Thank you very much, guys. Should we go to lunch? Okay.
Head to lunch.
Ready for lunch? Okay. Thank you.
That was 3 times the number of appointments you did in 2017, sir.
Okay, so President Donald Trump there just holding his first signing ceremony on Capitol Hill, making some last remarks there, saying it's unfortunate that he did that. This is not the time to discuss it, a reference to one of the final acts of President Joe Biden before he left office, which was issuing some pardons for his siblings, preemptive pardons for his siblings and also for some other individuals, Anthony Fauci, and also for General Milley, and also for the members of the January 6th investigation committee there in the House of Representatives. So we'll see if he refers to that a little bit later in the remarks that he will be making at the Capital One Arena. What we're looking at now, well, that is the luncheon. So President Trump will be making his way from the room he was just in for that signing ceremony down here for this luncheon with members of Congress. They're all seated there. We were watching a few moments ago as they were moving around the room and talking to each other, all seated at tables there awaiting a luncheon that will be taking place shortly. President Trump also expected to make remarks when he gets to that luncheon, but we may not be able to listen in to those. And for those who are interested, I can bring you the menu of this luncheon. The first course is going to be a Chesapeake crab cake with tomato tartare, bay sauce, pickled vegetables, Romanesco dill and chive oil. The second course will be a Greater Omaha Angus ribeye steak with plenty of vegetables. And the third course, a Minnesota apple icebox terrine with sour cream, ice cream and salted caramel. And wines are coming from California and Virginia to go along with that menu at the luncheon there that the members of Congress will be enjoying. Just before we brought you those images of the signing ceremony, we were speaking to Rodney Davis and also to Stephanie Murphy. We heard Rodney's reaction to Donald Trump's remarks earlier. Stephanie, just interested in what your view of what Donald Trump was saying earlier today. We've heard from him twice now.
Yeah, I think in his official speech, he started with the promise of a golden age and then filled the middle in with the usual comments about grievances, a little bit of disinformation, and then a little more about his false assertions and some dystopian themes regarding America. And then he finished out with, yet again, a promise of a golden age to come. And I think that's really the critical piece, right? Is can he reconcile some of the promises that he's made with a golden age? Can he both take Panama by force and be the peacemaker that he has promised? Can he implement severe immigration deportations and impact inflation by not driving up the cost of services in this country? So there are a lot of these contradictions that he laid out within his speech that remain to be seen whether or not he can deliver on it when he is governing. And I think the other thing I'll note is that he gets to start at what is the hardest for him from a public speaking perspective, which is to stay scripted. And the day will devolve into where he is far more comfortable. I think you got a sample of what you'll see later this evening when he spoke to the supporters. And, you know, in the rotunda, he had to kind of stay on script. When he went to speak to the supporters, he got to riff a bit more. And I imagine that by the time he gets to the arena tonight, he will be in full rally mode.
Okay, and then of course after the Capital One Arena, he also makes 3 further addresses to some of those glitzy inaugural balls going late on into the night. So a very busy day for President Donald Trump ahead. We're just looking at those images of the members of Congress, family members of Trump, some of his cabinet picks all gathered there here in Capitol Hill waiting that congressional luncheon in President Trump's honor. I want to bring in the former governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore, who was also U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe under the first Trump administration. Thanks very much for being with us here on BBC News. We were speaking earlier with our correspondents in Ukraine and in the Middle East about just what this Trump administration may mean for those areas. He didn't go into a whole lot of detail in his remarks earlier, but what can we expect, do you think?
Well, look, I thought that the speech was honest. I thought it was faithful to the things that he'd been saying. Americans sometimes think that politicians say one thing and then forget it when they get elected. That's not what President Trump did. He spoke exactly to what his priorities were going to be. He put emphasis on the previous administration and the previous party's culture wars that they had been doing in indicating that that was going to stop. I mean, it is true that you can't discriminate in favor of someone without discriminating against someone. And I think that he said that he was going to go back to a merit-based society. He was clear about inflation, about the border, and especially about energy policy. So he's doing what he said that he intends to do. The American people voted for a change, no question about that. They could have just kept the course going the same way, but they voted for change. And I think his speech indicated he wanted to be faithful to that.
Was there a particular highlight for you?
Well, look, I think that the Panama statement was remarkable. Let's see how that goes. I, of course, have always been an advocate myself for the Ukrainian war. I think that Putin and his aggression must be stopped. I didn't hear anything in the speech that was against that, so let's wait and see how that foreign policy goes. But in the meanwhile, what for me, the highlight was he laid out carefully the elements of what he thinks he needs to do in order to bring America up to a vision of greatness. And that particularly is energy policy. By the way, if the United States were to actually engage in an aggressive energy policy, that would hurt Putin badly, because Putin is not financing his aggression and his fascist war in any way except the oil sales. So that's going to be a consequence of President Trump's initiative on energy. But I thought that his statement on the culture wars was terrifically important. I thought the American people rejected the culture wars, and I thought that President Trump made it clear that we were going to stop being prejudicial and stop being favoritism of one group or another.
And Governor Gilmore, what did you make of his announcement that he intends to put American astronauts on Mars?
Well, listen, that's it's an uplifting sort of idea. I think that it's a program that's been underway, and he's clearly stated that he wants to continue space exploration, and that's something where America's always led the way. So it's exciting that he would say things like that. But I believe that at the end of the day, his real difference is going to be the changes that he's going to make in domestic policy. You could tell that it was not a gentle speech towards President Biden and his more liberal compatriots. I'm sure that the Clintons were uncomfortable. I didn't see President Obama, but I'm sure he was uncomfortable because President Trump was being clear that he was going to chart a new course and go in a different direction. Once again, I think that the American people had a choice, and that's what they chose. So I think he's being honest and faithful about his direction.
And indeed, there were moments when it felt like a State of the Union address almost this morning, didn't it? Where the Republicans who were in support of what he said were jumping to their feet and clapping, and the Democrats, and indeed many of those past presidents you mentioned, were seated and quite stony-faced throughout. How will President Trump move now to unite this country, which is still so polarized?
I think you're going to have to talk to the American people. The Democratic Party is pretty set in their ways in terms of their culture wars and their climate change issues as predominant things. I think that we all have to ask the question, why should the United States be wrecking their economy because of culture change or climate change when countries like China and others around the world continue to dirty the air? Why should it not be a equal type of situation? Why should it be why should it be a double standard to the detriment of Americans? I think that's what this president is really talking about. So I'm pretty happy about the talk. And yes, it did sound a little like a State of the Union address. But no, I think that it was an inaugural address. I think he was setting out exactly what his hopes and aspirations are, what he intends to do in his 4 years. That was very clear.
Okay. Former Governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News. While we've been speaking to Jim Gilmore there, we've been looking at images of that luncheon, which is just about to get underway in Capitol Hill here. And a lot happening, a lot still to come. So many set pieces to this day and so many new moments as well by virtue of moving it inside. So let's reflect now on one of the key moments of the inauguration day, of course, the inaugural address. We've been discussing it here, and in it, President Donald Trump issued a promise to the American people and to the world. He said the golden age of America begins right now. Here are some of the highlights of his speech.
From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. Let me use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers.
So just a few highlights there from President Donald Trump's inaugural address a little later. We're looking now at live pictures. You can see him seated there next to First Lady Melania Trump, and also beside her, Senator Fisher, and on the other side, Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance. They are there at the congressional luncheon that will get underway. Senator Amy Klobuchar, the Democratic senator who's the head of the Presidential Inauguration Committee, just making a few remarks there before this luncheon. You'll see lots of flowers in the room there. We were talking earlier about the menu for today, all of those flowers done by a florist in Virginia. So today very much a celebration of all things American, as well as a celebration of President Trump himself. Margaret Talev is still with us, senior contributor for Axios and director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism and Citizenship. Margaret, we were talking earlier about some of these remarks from Donald Trump, and there have been a lot of markers, I guess, of what we can expect from him that he's going to do for the rest of the day. We know he's going to sign some documents at that event at the Capital One Arena, and then others when he reaches the Oval Office at the White House. And it would seem from what he said that immigration policies are going to be top of the agenda.
Yes, that's right. And, there's been a buildup for this for several weeks. At first, we were hearing dozens. Then it was like perhaps 100. Today, reporting as many as 200. So we'll see precisely how many. But clearly, there's sort of a shock and awe plan to come out of day one, laying down very clear markers about his desire to move quickly and decisively to engage sort of emergency actions to declare a border emergency, kind of revert to those COVID era policies that allowed him to, that allowed the U.S. government to set aside their normal procedures and treat someone trying to cross into the United States differently because of what was at the time a health emergency. Now that COVID emergency is, I mean, it's no longer active the same way it was during the spike in COVID cases, but a lot of what President Trump is going to do by way of order is entirely likely to be litigated. There will be legal challenges to it, and then it will be up to the Supreme Court. So you saw today the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, attend to President Trump swearing in. You saw Brett Kavanaugh, who is another Trump nominee to the High Court, attend to Vice President J.D. Vance's swearing in. If you are one of the 9 members of the court, including those 2 who swore in, the president and the vice president, you know a lot of this stuff is coming your way between now and the typical end of the court session in June. Just a barrage of challenges to the moves that will be initiated. But I think you're right to say those immigration and border emergency type of actions are likely to be the first wave of what we see. I heard many other clues in that official inaugural remarks before the thing to the supporters. And it's interesting because we spent so much of sort of the Biden years thinking of Trump's foreign policy approach as more isolationist. And we really saw in the final weeks of the campaign, and certainly these weeks, couple of months since the election, that he does not want to be viewed as isolationist at all. In fact, expansionist is more the word that I would use to describe many of the initiatives he teased today, everything from planting the stars and stripes on Mars to idolizing former President McKinley, saying that he wants to rename Mount McKinley after the Obama administration made it Denali, and highlighting this issue with the Panama Canal, which was, of course, U.S.-built canal, turned an agreement to turn it over to Panama under the late President Jimmy Carter's administration, and President Trump saying, I want it back. I want it back now. McKinley himself was certainly an expansionist president, but also presided over major tariffs. And McKinley drew some criticism, actually, for more than expansionism, for imperialism toward his approach to the Philippines. So interesting to see President Trump elevate McKinley today. I think there's some symbolism there.
Okay, we've just pulled away from the congressional luncheon there because the rest of it is private at this point. They'll have their luncheon there, and shortly after that, President Donald Trump will make his way to the Capital One Arena to greet those supporters who have been watching proceedings on a big screen there. I want to bring in James Rosebush, former Deputy Assistant to President Ronald Reagan and former Chief of Staff to First Lady Nancy Reagan. James, we were speaking early this morning how it was Ronald Reagan who had kind of transformed the inauguration and brought that kind of Hollywood glamour to it and made it into the show and the ceremony that we're used to seeing now. I'm interested to get your view of what you've seen so far of this year's inauguration.
So that was the entertainment part of the inauguration we were talking about earlier. So in terms of the substantive part, you remember I worked for a president who was called the Great Communicator. So Reagan, in his speech, in the first inaugural, he was ranked as having the highest quality speech. Now, if you go back, and I've had a reason to do this over the past couple of weeks, I read through every inaugural address, and I can tell you that by far, at least probably 80% of these addresses are not important, they're not memorable, and they're also rather boring, I would say. So you have the ones that stick out, which are exceptional, and that would include, of course, our first president, General Washington, who mostly was saying that he wasn't really planning on accepting this responsibility, and he felt a great deal of humility about it and had a lot of grace about it. And then when you consider the fact that both of Lincoln's addresses were considered at a very high quality, and especially the second, where Lincoln was asking for the return of fellowship and support for one another after and during the terrible war. And he did it with such grace, because you remember that Lincoln grew up with only 2 books. He was very poor. He had 2 books. 1, the collected works of Shakespeare, and 2, the Bible. And that had a big impact on the way Lincoln communicated, both verbally and in words. So those were highly memorable. You have also the first address of Roosevelt, which was very precise in describing the condition of the U.S. economy at that time in particular, and the growing animosity among the West. And those were important things for him to refer to. And then, of course, you have some speeches that have memorable phrases that people can use in their own speeches or even in instruction in schools. So you have Kennedy's, don't ask what your government can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Of course, that's highly memorable. So we look for things like this in great speeches and speeches that are useful. And I would say, by and large, inaugural speeches have not been memorable, and they've not been particularly useful. And they have been, I would say, more in the generalist category, perhaps almost shy of wanting to be as assertive in terms of policy that perhaps they could have been. Now, you have a completely different kind of inaugural address with President Trump. So you see that he's reflected, and every president is reflected in their, not only the address that is written for them and they may be editing, but of course the way they present it as well. So it's not only the written message, but it's the verbal message. And also remember that 60% of all the power of communication is nonverbal. So there's a lot of people are looking for actually the spirit in which any kind of talk or any speech is given. So let's go to this one that we've heard today. So this reflects a man of action. This is a person who wants you to know exactly what he intends to do. And this is different than what we've heard before. And perhaps it reflects more of almost an anxiety that he feels Americans feel about the very different kinds of situations that America has been in over the past several years. And he wants to be the chief fixer. And perhaps he will be the chief fixer. But this is what he wants to communicate. He's not a prosaic person. He's not a person who's going to be metaphysical in terms of his description of America and America's role in the world in more of a spiritual sense, but a very much pragmatic one. And this will be accepted and lauded by a lot of people who want to see action taken. And they want to see specific action taken. And so what he's really given America is a policy speech and a promise. This is what I'm going to do, so watch me. This is very different than what we've had in the past, where we've had people who have been perhaps charged with bringing people together, or especially in the case of America. I was at a dinner recently where the honoree was the grandson of Winston Churchill. And we had a lovely conversation, and he had brought his nephew, who was in his early 20s, and he stood up during the very cooperative and pleasant conversation we were having, and he said, well, what's so great about America anyway? I don't understand it. And so I made a few comments, and I said, well, this is what's unique about America. And that America was created, and this is the vision that Reagan adopted and communicated, that America was put here to bring freedom to the entire world. And so we went on just very briefly about that, and he said, oh, now I get it. So I would say that most inaugural speeches aim to restore Americans' faith and conviction about their own country. And I think that if you
okay, and that, I think that is sorry for interrupting you, James, there, but I think that is what we were hearing from President Trump. Katty Kay is with us here. And Katty, we heard almost we did hear two different speeches from Donald Trump today.
And the day is young.
And I know we still have, I think, 5 more speeches from him to come. But we heard that very sort of presidential, traditional inaugural address, but with a lot of policy points in it as well earlier. And then the unscripted remarks was more classic Trump, but we still learned quite a lot about what he has in mind for this country.
Yeah, I mean, the unscripted part was more about his grievances. We would have won California, we would have won the 2020 election, the people that have been pardoned by Joe Biden. So some of the kind of more conventional Trump in that way. I mean, even the inaugural address was not that conventional in the sense that you don't often get a president standing there at inauguration saying they're going to take the Panama Canal. I haven't heard that before,
or
for
rename
example,
the Gulf of Mexico.
or rename the Gulf of Mexico. So with Trump, I think it's always worth, and one thing I learned from having covered him the first time, is to really make a distinction between what he says and what he does. So there will be a lot of attention out of this inaugural address on the Panama Canal, I just mentioned it, on the Gulf of Mexico. But what's going to happen actually in terms of economic policy? What is he going to do about those tariffs? What's going to happen for the American people in terms of bringing down prices, which was a big reason why he was elected? We've heard a lot about the cultural issues, and we saw that during the address. He addressed that, and that got a big round of applause. But so far, we don't know what the economic plan is yet. What's he actually going to do to bring those prices down, which is why a lot of Americans voted for him. And we may have to wait. You know, I think with Trump, you have to have a certain amount of patience. Today is kind of, as they said, shock and awe. But let's see what actually comes out of this.
And on that revenue raising, he outlined again in his inaugural address, which is kind of unusual to do this, what he called an external revenue service, where he's going to make other countries pay into this fund. On taxes, on tariffs, that he said he's sick of the American people, their tax money going elsewhere.
Yes, although what we haven't had yet, and there are several more hours left, and we've got to get to the Capitol Arena where he's going to make a speech, and we're not expecting to have, is an announcement of 25% tariffs, for example, on Mexico and Canada on day one, or 10% across the board tariffs on all imports into the United States. And I think what's happening, my understanding from talking to people around Trump, is that there is a debate going on within the economic team about how quickly to roll out those tariffs and what the scale of them is going to be in the end. Clearly, President Trump likes them, but there is also the risk that the speech, as Stephanie Murphy was saying, there are contradictions in this speech. He was elected to bring down prices. Jack up tariffs on food. America's a food importer. You jack up tariffs on proteins coming into the United States, you could drive up prices. So that's the kind of debate that's happening. I think always watch what happens and not just what is said.
And he said that himself actually in those remarks, the second remark, saying actions speak more than words, and in reference to those who've been charged and arrested with January 6th offences.
Yes, I mean we haven't had the final word on that again today. Maybe that's going to be.
He said it's coming later.
It's coming
watch
later.
out.
So let's watch what happens. How many of them get released? I mean, I think there was clear. I thought it was interesting that in those unscripted remarks, there was a certain amount of anger towards Joe Biden for the pardons towards his family and towards General Milley, and we heard that specifically towards Dr. Fauci. And whether that changes his calculation when it comes to January 6th, is possible that he does. You know, you did this, and therefore I can do. And it is extraordinary for a president, minutes before they lose the office of the presidency, to pardon preemptively all of their members of their family, when Joe Biden himself said he didn't like the look of Donald Trump doing that back in 2020. So when Donald Trump left office, so there's a contradiction there in Joe. We're living in an era where power is being consolidated in the executive office and in the office of the presidency. And I think, you know, you see the through line there from Donald Trump to Joe Biden did it, and now Donald Trump is going to do it again.
We'll be speaking about this in the weeks and months ahead. So just to ask you briefly, on those pardons that Joe Biden issued, given, as you say, what he has said about them in the past, is that damaging for the Democrats in terms of the rebuilding that they're trying to do? We've seen Joe Biden fly off now, and there's no obvious leader for the party.
Well, it's interesting that a Democrat actually texted me when those pardons happened and said they didn't like the look of this. That is not something they liked. I think they understand the Milley and the Fauci and the January the 6th committee. pardons more than they do the pardons of Joe Biden's family. I mean, the crime narrative around Joe Biden's family, which, you know, there aren't charges against these members of Joe Biden's families. There were investigations against one of them from the House Republicans, but there haven't been charges. That's a narrative that Democrats would like to now move on from, as they would like to move on from many things surrounding this presidency.
They will be, because that presidency is over
It's
now.
done.
It's President Donald Trump now. I want to go to Chicago to our news correspondent, Carl Nasman, because, of course, we've heard much about these immigration measures from the president himself in his inaugural address and for what may lie ahead through today and the coming days. Speaking of the potential raids in some of these so-called sanctuary cities. So, Carl, what can you tell us about what's going on in Chicago at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm obviously there in Washington, D.C. It's all about the inauguration of Donald Trump, the ceremonies there. But here in Chicago, just an hour or so ago, a massive protest really making its way through the downtown streets, ending up here at Trump Tower itself, which is right along the Chicago River. There were hundreds of people, I have to say, braving the cold. It might even be colder here in Chicago than it is there in Washington, D.C. These demonstrators out actually to protest Donald Trump's day one agenda, saying that they want to protect minority rights. They're concerned about the erosion of LGBTQ rights here as well. But top of the agenda, as you mentioned, obviously, is immigration and the policy of Donald Trump, which we've already started to see being rolled out now with those executive actions and executive orders having to do with the border, having to do with immigration, and specifically here in Chicago, the threats, which now has been walked back a bit. We're not sure this will happen this week or not, but of maybe some deportation rates taking place here among the undocumented community. I have a guest here. I just want to ask you a quick question. We have Cristobal Cavazos of Immigrant Solidarity DuPage. You've been speaking with people in the community here, those who are also undocumented. What have they been telling you about Donald Trump's immigration agenda and potential action in terms of deportations?
Well, they feel a big insult. There's people around here, people in the march today that have been here for 30 years, for 40 years, for 25 years, and not just twiddling their thumbs. People in Chicago, we have a lot of food manufacturing, beverage manufacturing, people who have been doing essential work during COVID, essential work in the sweeping the floors, cleaning, chopping the vegetables, you know, in California, picking the fruits and vegetables, the majority of workers, undocumented workers. So we know our value here, and that's why we're out here fighting, because if we don't fight, there's not going to be any respect. Donald Trump has put a lot of insults to our community, but what we're showing today with our solidarity is we have a great self-respect here, and we're not going to let anybody do us to be a bully to us.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. And it's really interesting to see, of course, Katrina, given all the fear and unease, specifically here in Chicago, because of all that talk about some potential immigration enforcement, hundreds of people out on the streets, and many of them, we were speaking with them, are undocumented themselves. So folks saying, you know, it's important that they come out today on Inauguration Day to make their voices heard and to support immigrants, whether they're documented or undocumented.
Okay, Carl Nasman there in Chicago. Thank you for that. I just want to get a final quick thought at this point from our panelists. To you first, Stephanie. On that notion of immigration, and we don't know exactly what's going to come in terms of movements for the rest of the day, is that something that you think there is a sense of fear around?
I think it depends on who you ask. There are certainly a significant number of the American people who want to see reasonable immigration policies implemented. And particularly, there's broad support for targeting folks who are not only here illegally, but are committing crimes. I think the support begins to erode based on most recent polling by CNN. It begins to erode a bit when it comes to taking away birthright citizenship or some of the other things that the Trump administration has proposed. What I will note, though, is just in the final remarks here is that, you know, the speech took place in the Rotunda, and one of my favorite carvings in the Rotunda is of Cleo. She is riding on the chariot of time. Essentially, she's in the car of history, and she's standing in this chariot, and it's a reminder that history is being recorded as time progresses. And I think that that is true in this case with this presidency. Today's day one, but history will be watching and recording what this administration actually succeeds beyond what the rhetoric that they issued today.
And Rodney, just a quick thought from yourself as well. What's your high point at this part of the day so far?
You know, it has been a privilege to be able to serve in Congress, just like Steph, and she's right. There's so much history in a place like the Capitol Rotunda, Statuary Hall, where the lunch is happening today. I've never actually had it smell so good. It was so floral when I was walking through there today. But one thing that matters in life and in that historical record are results. And Donald Trump had results in reducing illegal immigration. And when you want to look at the results, Donald Trump talks about what he wants to do to reduce what America has witnessed over the last 4 years at our southern border. And he's already seen some of those results. If you are a convicted criminal who has entered this country illegally, yes, you should be scared that you're going to be sought after and sent back to the country of your origin. That is something that Donald Trump promised to do, and frankly, a good number of Americans across all demographics, across all races, everywhere in this country said he wanted them to do. These are the issues that he promised to address. And when you go through this initial steps of his presidency, when you start to look at executive orders, we can begin to go through each and every one of those line by line. But in the end, you have to take it through a prism of what do his supporters who sent him back to the White House want the most, and he is going to try to address it. It was in his speech today. It was in his speech to his supporters afterwards, just a different way of saying it in a different tone, and it will be in the many speeches for the rest of tonight.
And indeed, we are expecting him to sign some of the documents relating to some of those actions when he gets to the Capital One arena a little later, and another set of signings that will happen in the Oval Office a little bit after that. Thanks to you both for being with us. Rodney Davis, former Republican congressman from Illinois, and Stephanie Murphy, former Democratic congresswoman from Florida. Well, we have plenty more to come for you still during the program here. President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance are currently having lunch in the Capitol here behind us, and after that they will move along with many of the other set pieces of today, and then he'll get down to that all-important work that he has flagged. So do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. There have certainly been winners and losers with the weather story this Monday. In Fife earlier this afternoon, we had some beautiful sunshine, very nice. And Scotland, once again, seeing some of the highest temperatures. But it was a different story further south. There's been, again, a lot of low grey cloud, drizzle at times, misty conditions as well. And this weather front that's responsible for that is not moving very far, very far.
Presidential inaugurations are momentous occasions, full of symbolism to celebrate the peaceful transition of power. But every now and then, all this pomp and ceremony has left us with some awkward moments. The oath of office is the main feature of the day. Getting it right is of the utmost importance.
So help me God.
But sometimes nerves can betray us, as happened to President Obama when the Chief Justice misplaced the word faithfully in the oath.
Will execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
That I will execute
faithfully the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States faithfully.
Obama was not the only one mixing his words up. Listen to Lyndon Baines Johnson in JFK's inauguration.
I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation whatever.
January is usually very cold in Washington, which has left us with some memorable fashion moments, but also some wardrobe malfunctions. Inauguration Day 1841 was particularly miserable, but the weather from giving a nearly 2-hour speech without his coat on. Harrison caught a cold that eventually led to his death from pneumonia exactly 1 month after taking office. Ronald Reagan holds the record for both the warmest and the coldest inauguration yet. In 1985, it had to be moved indoors because of temperatures of negative 14 degrees.
Okay, we just had an enormous gust of wind here.
And his wife, Nancy, forgot to introduce him at the inaugural band concert. let's not forget the parades. In 1953, President Eisenhower was lassoed by a cowboy. The Secret Service was not impressed. And how about this peanut-shaped balloon? It celebrated Jimmy Carter's past as a peanut farmer. Will Donald Trump's inauguration leave us any memorable moments?
My, oh my, how do you follow Elon Musk when he tells you you're going to take you to Mars? I'll tell you how. He and I share some